Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and we're going to be picking up our new player guide here. I said the last one would be quick, and I lied. I lied right to your face. This one actually will be. So, in this one, we're going to talk about where to place forts and how that works. I had mentioned in the previous video, we've talked before about resources. It's basically the iron and materials you need to make good armor. And we've talked about recruitment points. This is basically like how willing the local population is to come and like sign up. And when you make a fort, so we have to talk about recruiting. And if you click on any province, so I'll click on this one, and then you'll go to the recruitment screen, which you click on this castle here. You can see we're making some troops here. These are independent troops. These are not our national themed troops. These are not our thick Ulm boys wearing black steel plate. Just the locals, all right? And generally the locals are not very good fighting. All they're good at for usually is just taking their paycheck, all right? So what you want to do is you don't want to go around making a ton of these guys. You want to make these guys. This is where it's at. You want to make your really high quality national troops. So to do that, you need to build a fort. Now, building a fort, we can just build one here. You can click on this defend button, or whatever the little the order they currently have at the bottom left of their unit icon, or you can hit spacebar, which is what I do, and I pull up this menu. And then at the bottom, under construction, it'll have construct building. You click that, boom. And then you click build palisade, right? You need enough money. They're expensive. A palisade for us is $1,000, and it's going to take 5 months to finish. And it tells us some other interesting statistics about the palisade. If we look at the bottom, if I move my mouse, it's going to go away. But the palisade has an admin value of 15. And a recruitment bonus of 50 points, okay? And a commander point bonus of 0 points. And then a siege defense or a wall strength of 200 points. The siege supplies doesn't matter that much, and a time to build is 5 months, okay? So we can go construct it, and then we'd hit intern 5 times, and then a fort would be here. We'll do this. But first, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the mechanics of how actually, we'll go ahead and build it. I'll pause. Actually, we'll walk you through it. I'm going to hit construction. We're going to hit build. I'm going to hit intern. And I'm going to do this 4 more times until it pops up. Okay. So I hit intern a few times. You can see we have neighbors now. I didn't do any expansion or anything. Now, when you're building a fort, do not just hit intern and wait for it to pop up. Okay. Do the rest of your turn. But this fort just popped up, so we have a palisade. And you can see it looks a lot less intimidating than the main fortress we have here in Ulm. And that's because it's kind of a pile of sticks compared to this beautiful fortress we have. This fortress, we could continue upgrading it. We could upgrade it into a fortress. What we have in Ulm is actually a citadel. You can see up here at the top. So we could upgrade our palisade, which what it currently is, into a fortress. And it's going to be better. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about the changes that happen when you build a fort. The first thing you'll see is we can now get most of the troops, most of our national roster. There's some parts of our national roster we can't get. This unit, the Guardian, which has this really cool magic weapon, sadly, we can't get him anywhere. We can only get him in our capital, right? So if we come over here, you'll see we have every unit, but the Guardian is missing. And you're like, okay, well, how would I know that? You know that you can't get the Guardian, Lucid, but how would I know it, right? One thing you can do is if you come over here in the national overview, or you can do it on the recruitment screen, certain units will have in parentheses next to them can only be recruited in the capital. And this is the only unit down here that has that ability. You'll also see it's on some of the commanders, like this priest smith, and also on this black priest. Both these guys can only be recruited in the capital. So they have that designator. The Guardian also has it. Now, most of the time, units which can only be recruited in the capital are going to be on the right. But pretty much, for everything else, you can recruit the national troops in your fort. So that's one of the main reasons you build your fort, is so that you can get your national mages and you can get your national troops. The other reason you build them is because they're going to add recruitment points. So this province before had recruitment points of probably like around 100. You could scroll back in the video and see what it was, but it's probably right around 100. because we built this fort, it gives a recruitment point bonus of 50%. What that means is that instead of having 100 recruitment points to spend, this is how many people are willing to sign up, we get, 154, which is a major improvement. So that's one of the major reasons to upgrade forts, is to get more recruitment points. What's important, though, too, is that these recruitment points don't come from surrounding lands. They can only come from the province you build the fort in. So in general, what you want to look for are high recruitment point provinces to build a fort in. So I'm going to click on other ones. You look right here in this right corner where I've got my mouse. This one has 88 recruitment points. This one has 110. This one has 94. This one has 119. This one has 100. This one has 92, 115, 100, 122, 118, 90. Okay, so they're pretty much all going around. They're all right around 100. Some provinces that tend to have very little population, like a swamp or a wasteland, I don't think we've conquered any of those yet, but if we did, we would see those provinces in particular have very few recruitment points. So if you want to be building units which take hardly any recruitment points at all, those are bad locations usually to build a fort. So let's summarize that point again. Recruitment points, you get a bonus from your fort. This bonus will increase as you level up your fort. For example, in this citadel, instead of getting a 50% bonus, we get a 125% bonus. Okay. So as we level up our fort, the recruitment points increase. The recruitment points increase the recruitment points that are already currently in the province, right? It doesn't pull from surrounding provinces. And the reason I mention it doesn't pull from surrounding provinces is because there's another thing that forts do where it does pull from surrounding provinces. And that is particularly, it pulls in extra resources, right? So you can see we have a ton of resources in this fort. We get 282. How do we have 282 when this place is just 90? This place is just 87. This place is 41. How is this one all the way up at 282? Well, I can give you the answer. The answer is because this province was a mountain, and mountains tend to have high resources to start with. But more importantly, forts are going to pull resources from adjacent provinces. You can think of it like this province is, unsettled. There's no fort in it. But that, people are out here still working the land and getting the resources. They just can't really use the iron and stuff they're harvesting on the local recruitment. So instead, they're shipping it basically to the castle, to the fort nearby, and then it'll be put into producing national troops. So the way this works mechanically is the higher your administration value is. What this basically says, we're going to pull 15% of the resources in all adjacent provinces and pool them in this fort. So it's a way to very quickly get more resources in a province so that you can recruit more units. I mean, we can actually get a fair amount of units here. This is not bad recruitment for your first fort. Okay, so basically, what is the ideal? Taking these two things we know, what is the ideal place to put a fort? Just based on the things I've told you, the ideal place is you want a super high population province that's going to have a lot of recruitment points. So that'd be something like this. We haven't taken it yet. Well, let's see if we can get our guys down here. Well, this one's really high. This one's got 128. Let's take this out. Okay. So we've taken this. And yeah, you can see it's got 153 without having any fort present. That's way higher than the 100 or something that these other provinces have. So this would be a great place to build a fort because it's got really high recruitment points. It's a high population province. There's an additional bonus you get to building forts in high population provinces, and that is that this administration value, which is going to help bring in resources from neighboring provinces, it's also going to help you collect extra taxes. And I believe the bonus you get for extra gold income is going to be half of the administration value. So this is going to give like 7% more income, which, it's not a huge amount, but hey, it's 7% more income and one of your best provinces in terms of income. So like I would totally take 7% more of 170 gold per turn. So yeah, that's another reason that you generally want to fort your high income provinces or your high population provinces. Now that's not the only consideration, because if we're going to be making troops out of our fort, we also want to have a lot of high resource provinces nearby. So this is a plains, it only has 59 resources. But this is a forest, and you can see it has 129. So if you look at the resources of provinces that would be adjacent to your fort location, you can get a pretty good sense of if it's, going to be a good location. You can also hit, what is the hotkey? Let me find it. Okay, I believe it's Control 4. Control 4. This is a nice way to look at a glance to see like, okay, you can just look and you can see this is a high income province, the gold coins here. Control 4 to toggle it. I mean, you can see, look at the hammers and see where there's a lot of resources. So you can see this is a really high resource province. This is a high gold province. This is a high resource province. So you can already see from kind of looking at this that we've got a high gold. This means probably high population. We've got a high population province adjacent to two high resource provinces. That's already telling me this is potentially a really good place to put a fort right here, right? This province also is not a bad place to put a fort, because we've got, this is a pretty high resource province. 70 is not bad. 90 is pretty good. But if we were to control all 5 of these provinces around it, we would be drawing in resources from all 5. So that's another thing. Also, if I were to fort every province, you can't draw resources from provinces that are already forted. And if this province can't give more than 100% of its resources away. So if I build a fort here, we have already got my capital, but I built another fort here, and then I built a fort here, and I built a fort here, and I built a fort here. We would be sucking all the resources away from this fort. And what that would mean is that, potentially I would shut down some of the production, the troop production in my capital, because there's not enough resources for it. So if you build too many forts in your cap circle, or even too many adjacent to one province in your cap circle, you can end up sucking away the resources for your fort. This isn't something you really need to worry about, and I'm probably going into a bit too much detail. The main point is that forts suck resources from the provinces around them. Generally, be cautious building forts in your cap circle. It's totally fine to build forts outside of your cap circle, even if they suck away some of the resources from provinces in your cap circle. I wouldn't worry about that much as a new player. But like, if these were the provinces I got after expansion, I would probably look to build a fort here. I'd look to build a fort here, and I'd probably look to build a fort maybe up here. The other reason you want to build a fort, and this is kind of the last, I think this is the last thing we got a couple more things to say about this, but one of the last things we'll say is that the other reason you build forts is because, you're building them to build units. Those units are going to help project military power in a region, right? So let's say Nazca, this nation right here with this kind of radiant flag, if they attack me over here, I don't want to have to take troops all the way from my main fort, Ulm, and march all the way over here and attack them. That would take several turns. The war would be going pretty far south if I didn't have something to come and retake this land more quickly. But if I have a fort right over here, they come over here and they take these provinces, I can ride out from this fort and meet them as they move from here to here and here to here. I could meet them in the field over here because I've got an army stationed in this fort. So the other thing to think about is you want your forts positioned to project power onto your border. However, you want to be careful about putting your forts directly on a border, because you may just put up a fort here and they see, oh, there's a fort here and it's not defended. And then they attack it and now you don't have a fort and they do. So that's another thing to kind of balance in, is on one hand, you want to have your forts kind of towards your borders, but you don't want to have them in highly exposed places. You don't want to have them in places adjacent to enemy armies. You don't want to have them in places that are like, a little peninsula sticking out into enemy land that's going to be really hard for you to defend. So another kind of rule of thumb for this is try to keep your forts like at least like no more than 2 provinces away from another fort, right? So you build your fort here, you're looking to build, gap and then a fort. And then if you want to build a fort up here, this one actually might be a tough spot to build a fort because it's like I've got to go 2 provinces to get from my cap here. So because of that, maybe I actually build a fort here instead, right? And this would be a fine place to build a fort. We're a lot closer to my cap. What does that mean? It means if somebody comes and sits on this fort to attack it, I can ride an army out from my cap and get there pretty quickly to defend it. But imagine if I built the fort all the way up here and somebody goes and attacks it. It's a long walk to get all the way up here. It will take me many turns. So you want to have, your forts are projecting power. You don't want them sitting on top of each other. You want them split up to like harvest resources from the land efficiently. But you do want them close enough that you can like reinforce a fort that gets attacked from another fort. Okay? So your forts are going to be making units. The last thing we have to talk about here, so this actually will be a short video. Oh, no. Yeah, I keep thinking of one more thing I could do. I'm like, the last thing, but there's another last thing, is labs and temples. All right, so we've built this fort here, but if you'll notice, we can build commanders. Lots of different commanders we can build. These are all built, but these ones over here are grayed out. So I can't click on it. I'm trying to click on it. It won't let me, right? And it turns out I can't build any mages, right? So anybody who has magic paths, I can't build. And that's very frustrating. And the other thing I can't build is I can't build priests. This is the priest path. I can't build anybody who's a priest, and I can't build anybody who's sacred. Even if I normally should be able to build them at forts. And the reason is you need labs to build mages and you need temples to build priests. So I'll show you that now. We're going to move this guy over here. I'm going to make this guy my... Do I have a prophet somewhere? Okay. Okay, so I've got a mage here. We are going to... Here's the thing. I said you need to build a lab to make mages. The other thing is you need a mage to build a lab. So this guy, the scout, this guy was fully capable of building a fort. Any commander can build a fort, but to make a lab, you need to be a mage. So we can click our scout. You can see fortress here. You can see lab and temple. They're grayed out. It's because we've got our scout selected. But if I select the mage can upgrade the fort, but he can also build a lab. And that's pretty important. So we're going to go ahead and build a lab with him. We're going to upgrade the fort with this guy. And then I've got a priest. We're using our prophet, who we said at the beginning. We've got our priest coming, and the priest is going to build the temple. Okay, so the priest has arrived, and we're going to construct building. We're going to build temple. You'll notice right now, if I were to click recruit, which is the R key, or it's clicking on this castle icon, click. If I click recruit, you'll notice that mages are available. I can build mages. This is our national mage. This also happens to be a special province that has an independent mage. This is not something I can build normally. This actually is a really good mage. It's something I would definitely want to build as Ulm. And I get it, because when I conquered this province, it happened to have this crystal Amazon independent colony here. So this is a very special province. I get to build these kind of mages here, which is awesome. So yeah, you need a lab. You can build these now because we have a lab constructed. Awesome. But what we cannot build is we cannot build our priests yet. And then this is a priest that actually, with this question mark, these are random paths you can get if you're lucky. You have 50% chance to get a path. A lot of times if you're a mage and a priest, you need to have both a lab and a temple. So we're going to go ahead and build this temple, and then we'll be able to build our priests. Okay, and so now if we want to, we can recruit our priests. So a pretty typical thing you would do in a game is you figure out where you want to build some forts. Maybe you would build, at the beginning of the game, it would be very reasonable to have your cap and then 2 other forts that are fully upgraded and have a lab and a temple in them. That's not always what you want to do, but it's a thing that'd be reasonably common. Sometimes you would want 3 in addition. But yeah, so that's a thing you would do. And then you start building mages and priests, and you get together armies that you think will be capable of killing another player or defending your lands. There's a lot of other things to talk about. We could talk about site searching. That'll probably be a whole separate video. There's one more thing I just want to cover very basically here, which is this. I've talked a little bit about it. If I hit Control-3, it'll toggle on and off the Dominion. So you can see it here. This is the Dominion. And what that means is it's every province I have a candle in. So you can see there's a candle here, there's a candle here. If I click on a province, like I click on this one, you can see it has an enemy candle. It says black candle. If I click on this province, there's no candles. And if I click on this one, it's got these lit candles. These are friendly candles. So the yellow border is basically just a very quick visual way to show you, hey, these provinces all have at least one friendly candle in them, right? But you can see my capital has a lot of friendly candles. It's got up to 5 friendly candles. So yeah, this is basically the places where my god's presence is, and you get bonuses from it. If you have good scales, those were those things we talked about at the beginning of the first video when you were designing your god. Those scales are going to potentially give you all sorts of benefits, from faster growing population to more resources to more gold. They can also give you malices. They can make you have worse population. They can make you poor. They can make you misfortunate. They can do all sorts of bad things. Whether they're good or bad, they will only spread in the presence of your dominion, right? So as you spread out your dominion with these candles, they're going to spread out the scales that you took when you picked your god. So, one thing you can do, though it's not really advisable to new players, is you could not really spread your dominion because you don't really have very good dominion at all. You don't worry about it. However, if you run out of dominion, if you're like, I don't like my dominion, we're not going to spread it at all, I'm not going to build any temples, which is one of the ways to spread dominion, and your dominion eventually goes away, well, you're dead. So that's one of the ways to die in this game, is if you lose all your dominion, or if you lose all your provinces. Either way, you die. So generally, you kind of want to spread your dominion. There's bad things that can happen if you're an enemy dominion too. So generally, you want to spread it. The way you spread it, there's basically 2 ways. You can have a priest. Like here, we've got our prophet. We click spacebar, or we click down here on his unit action, and we click to preach. And the basic rule is they can preach up to twice their holy level. So this guy can preach until there's 6 candles in a province. So he's in a province that's 2 candles. So he could actually sit in this for probably like 4 turns and preach it up to 6. If you're in a temple, you get to preach it up 1 level higher. So instead of 6, you could preach it up to 7. And there is a temple present. So my prophet could sit here and preach all the way until we're up to 7 candles. So that would be kind of cool. Yeah. So that's one way to get it up. The second way is temples will generate this thing called a temple check. You don't really need to understand what it is. The main thing is that the things that preaching is local. So I could have this guy, our prophet, preaching here all day. It's not going to spread out of the single province he's in. Okay? But anything that generates a temple check, which is basically just temples, and your prophet and God also generate, your prophet and God act like they are temples. So they also generate these things called temple checks. But the only thing you need to know is this is like wherever you put a temple, it's like a fountain. And it's a fountain pouring out your dominion. And it's going to go and fill up the province it's in, and then it's going to spill over sometimes and fill out the province next to it. And it's going to keep spilling and spilling and spreading until it runs into enemy dominion, and then it can't spread any further. And then you get like, okay, maybe your dominion's stronger. It pushes in for a little bit. A lot of times what happens is it just builds up inside your own territory, and it'll just get higher and higher as the game goes. But it can't go higher than your dominion strength, which was that part at the beginning when we picked how many candles we have. If you remember, we picked 5. So if you go back and check, there's a point where I clicked the candles up to 5. What that means is that these temple checks, these parts where like the fountains are filling things up, they're only going to fill it up to 5 candles. And at that point, it'll be full, and any more temple checks that are generated, they're going to go somewhere else. So that's basically how that works for spreading your dominion. So let's just go over what we've talked about. We've talked about how and where. We've talked about recruitment points, which are basically limited to the province you're in. You get bonuses from having a fort, though, but it's one of the reasons you want to build forts in high population places that have a lot of recruitment points, is that's going to determine how many of these resources you have to spend on troops. We talked about resources, which are gathered from areas surrounding a fort, brought into the fort, and then you get to spend them down here as resources on troops. We talked about how to make commanders. A lot of your national commanders you can make without a lab or a temple, but some of them, your mages, you need a lab. Your priests, you need a temple, and your mage priests, you need both. But once you have them, you can start making things. Sometimes, too, there's a sacred unit. Like this Pegasus Rider, you know, I told you this was a special Crystal Amazon province. There's a special independent sacred we can make here. So if you wanted to make this, you also need a temple. Anytime there's a sacred unit you want to make, you need a temple as well. So it's not just the priests. And then, as a side effect of having temples, you're going to spread your own dominion, which can be pretty swell. You can also make priests to walk around and have them preach in places to spread dominion, but they can only preach up to usually about twice their level. They can also get rid of enemy dominion. So the mages, which you're making from your labs, they have a few things they can do. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a later video, but I'll just give you the summary. They can research. That's what they tend to do by default when you make them. And this lets you get more magic unlocked. So we probably need to talk about that at some depth. We talked about it a little bit in the last video. They can site search, right? So you click automatic site search, and they'll walk around and they'll try to find fire and earth sites. The thing is there's a bunch of sites in the map which are basically hidden to you. You can't see them. They're all generated at map load, and there's a fixed number. You can't like really get more. You sort of can through events, but for practical purposes, you can't get more sites than were generated at the start of the game. And there's anywhere between like 2 to like 6 provinces, 2 to 6 sites per province, or, you know, really 0 to 6. And you can try to find them. And different types of provinces have different types of chances for different kinds of sites. But once this guy searches up, you know, for Fire 1 or Earth 2 sites, he doesn't ever need to look in the same province again. It's not happening, right? So basically, this guy can find up to a level 1 fire site or up to a level 2 earth site in a province. And if he doesn't find it, you know, better luck next time, move on to the next province. So if you put it on auto site search, he's going to walk around looking for sites. And the sites in general are just basically ways to give you your magical gems. This is how you forge magical items, summon magical creatures, cast big, powerful magical spells. So that's basically the things mages can do. The last thing mages can do, of course, well, there's actually not last, there's a few more. They can actually cast these spells, so we could like summon a scorpion beast, right? We can forge items. So let me show you how to do this. So you can hit space and you look for it on the list, or you can click here, you look for it on the list. We can cast a ritual spell, boom. And it'll pull us up to this. We get to pick, this will only show you the things you can cast, though some of the things are grayed out, because what this tells me is you need to be a Fire 2 mage to summon a Fire Drake. It's grayed out because you're only a Fire 1, but we're still showing it to you because you're a Fire Mage. But for example, there's a bunch of nature spells it's not showing because you're a level 0 nature mage. You can forget about that pipe dream. Why it shows you a level 2 fire spell if you're only a Fire 1 is because it's pretty easy to put a fire booster on and go from Fire 1 to Fire 2. It's a certain type of item. But yeah, so it's Control C to go to the cast menu, or it's, you know, space and then find cast ritual spell. You can also do forge magical item. This also is F or Shift F. So yeah, you can forge magical item. We don't really have any we can make. We do some research. We have to research construction first. But that's another thing mages can do, is they can make items. And then of course you can send them in your armies. So we're going to go to the army setup screen right here. It says cross swords. And you can script your mages and send them into combat. And it's only going to show you things they can cast here. Again, it's going to gray out stuff which you have the paths for, but maybe you're not a high enough level. And so you can script these guys and move them around in your big armies. So that, you know, that's basically how you use mages. So yeah, this is basically how you start scaling up. And, you know, once you've expanded, once all the gray flags are gone, there's normally a point in the game. Oftentimes it's between like turn 10, and if you're in a new player game, maybe even as late as turn 20, where all the gray flags are going. That means all the independents are conquered. And then if anybody's going to grow from that point forward, they're going to have to conquer new players, right? So, you know, ideally you get some temples being built and you get an army prepared so you can be the person, you know, if you get attacked, you're able to defend yourself, or you're able to go out there and attack another player. So yeah, that's it. I think we, you know, there's certainly a lot of things we haven't covered. I've tried to be kind of quick. I feel like these videos have kind of dragged a little bit more, not dragged, but maybe I get pulled into more depth maybe than I wanted to in some of these. Let me know what you guys thought. Was this too much information, too high level, too low level? Do you have other topics you want me to cover? Let me know. And then also, if you're able to actually kind of use these videos and get into a game and have some fun, let me know, because that's actually my main goal, is I can still remember like my first Dominions games and when I logged in, or logged in, when I got into it, I was like trying to figure everything out, and it was this crazy magical world, and I didn't really know how it worked. It was fascinating and fun, but I was also just like, what is going on? But I got to the point where I was having fun reasonably quickly, and that's the experience I want to have you. I want you, I don't want to get rid of or dispel the kind of the mysticism about how complicated and interesting and deep this game is. That's for you to kind of explore, especially as a new player. I mean, there's tons of information out there. I'm sure if you get into the game, you'll avidly consume it. But I want to kind of help ease your transition into just knowing the basics of what's happening. So let me know if I accomplished my goal, if you were able to use this and play some games. And yeah, let me know if you've got any more topics you want to cover, things like that. Always look forward to hearing from you in the comments. So yeah, until then, thank you, folks. Okay, I forgot one thing, so sorry for like ending the video multiple times. But one thing I didn't really mention, or maybe I only mentioned in passing, is commander points. And that is a major reason for which you upgrade forts. So if you look here, any province has 1 commander point you get, right? Generally, when you build a palisade, if you look at it, you'll see a commander point bonus. It's not a percent, it's usually like a number, an integer. So this is 0. Generally, most palisades are 0. There's a couple nations like Mictlan, usually nations where the highest fort you can build is a palisade. Those will tend to give you a commander point bonus of 1. But generally, you need to upgrade a fort twice. So like here, we're building a fortress. When this is done, our fortress is going to, not only is it going to collect more resources, it's not only is it going to give more recruitment points for units, but this fort is also now going to have a bonus commander point. And what does that mean? Well, some units, if you look here, it says recruitment points and commanders, but really this is commander points, how much they cost. But yeah, so commanders, a lot of them cost 1 if they're just like a basic commander. Most mages cost 2. So once you build a fort, if you're just at a palisade, you can only get 1. Like if I were to have queued him up previously in the palisade, he would be grayed out. And that's because it would say -1 commander point, because it would spend the 1 commander point it had, but there'd be 1 point needed left to finish recruiting the mage. So if you waited 2 turns, it would come out. So basically, if you don't have an upgraded fort, usually you have to wait an additional turn for each commander. So it's like you get a new mage every other turn. But once you've upgraded your fort, you can get 2 every turn. And then if you have a very high level fort, like this citadel is a very high level fort, you can see it has a commander point bonus of 2. So we can potentially recruit 3 commanders. If we get an extra one more than we can afford, then you see we have this -1 here, which means we'll pay for it next turn. So anyway, that's how that works. Commander points are really important. It was a small but important detail that I originally left out, so I'm adding it back in. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Cheers.